Well, thank you so much, Chris, for being on the show. I really appreciate it. It's good to talk to you in person, talk to you via email.
I know it's great how I think we connected. I'm not sure if it was like Facebook or Twitter, but it's good
Yeah.
to talk to you here and um, build that screen to screen connection.
Yeah, we'll be in New York soon, so we'll meet face to face. I I think a lot of people know about your documentary. A lot of people have talked about Unstuck, and I want to get into that. But I think it'd be interesting to also hear your backstory about how OCD came into your world and into your family. That'd be interesting.
Sure. Vanessa had when she was 8 years old. She is about to turn 13 now. So
Oh, wow.
about 5 years ago or so, she just had a month where she just became a completely different person. It was coming off of like some incidents with the family where we had a good friend who passed away from cancer. She had a kid at school had cancer. She had an issue where she was sick. We initially thought it might be something called pandas, but basically, she was. My brother was in town, and they were school was out, and she and her sister were spending the week with my brother here in New York, and we had left for a couple days to work, and then we were going to come back out. And during that time, my nephew got a tick on him, and it was like a flip of a switch. Vanessa wouldn't leave the house, go near him. She totally freaked out. It extended not just to him, but things she was eating. She was checking labels. It was like, holy, what happened? She wouldn't spin around. She wouldn't run. She was like, I don't want to throw up. I'm going to get sick. So we really had no idea what was going on. We knew something was wrong, and it was like, why is this panic attack happening? And that kind of sent us down the road of what's mental health wise is going on. What is this issue? We were very lucky early on both my wife and I had experience with therapists, so we kind of knew that might be something we need to deal with. We had a woman at my wife's work who, when she was describing what was going on with Vanessa, she was like, kind of sounds like have you looked at this thing called OCD? And that started us down. Let's Google stuff and see what it is, and then
That's lucky.
understand. Yeah, and then her school, it was like during I'm talking the time period I'm talking about is, let's say, July and the beginning of August. So within a span of like 6 weeks, we were able to. My wife also had she was on the PTA, and there was a meeting with the summer meeting of the PTA. So she talked to the principal and said, "But this is going on with Vanessa. Do you know any therapists?" And we got her into play therapy very quickly. And the play therapist, within like a meeting or two, said, "I don't think I can help you. I think this is, something bigger." So we, looking back on that, it's rare. It's not often that I think therapists will tell you we can't help you.
Yeah, I think that's actually kind of lucky
Yeah.
because you could have been spinning your wheels for a really long time.
Yes, and you hear a lot of stories where people will say, "Oh, we were with somebody for a year, 6 months, it just wasn't working." And initially, it was helpful. It was just helpful for Vanessa to have somebody to talk to, and
Yeah.
we knew that she had to get help. So, like, that therapist basically said to us, "I'm better than nothing. I will stick with you until you find an OCD therapist." In the meantime, while we were, while Vanessa was still doing this therapy, we found um, somebody to diagnose her. So it happened the person who did like the intake diagnosis form where they kind of meet you. I don't know what the name of that test, Yale something,
So the Y
but
box.
yeah. So when luckily the therapist that did that for us also practiced exposure and response prevention therapy, which we knew at the time was something that Vanessa needed. So we were interviewing therapists, and it just turned out that the one who kind of did our diagnostics ended up having space, and Vanessa started to go to therapy. So within, let's say the incident I referred to early on with the tick was like, let's say, the end of June, and by the end or middle of August, she was already at an OCD therapist. So it moved pretty quickly, even though that was like, a really hard summer and a very panic stricken summer. Vanessa had a hard time. She had like superstitious fears, like stepping on a crack will break my mother's back. We used to get phone calls during the day. Are you guys okay? Rocks in the street, worried about radium. There was just like everything was an issue. We had no idea. Everything was an issue. And so we eventually started down the road of OCD and OCD therapy. And then, let's say, took a good, let's say, year and a half, 2 years to really start getting better for her. We started down, therapy was helpful initially. Then it kind of took a couple steps back, but, we just kept at it, kept doing exposures, got a lot of good ideas, read every book we could on OCD, and trusted that the process would work. And then Vanessa eventually started to have some victories, and then once she really, about a year in, she had a really big victory. There's a scene in the film when she talks about like touching a tree, hugging a tree. That was like a year of every day us like inching closer to the tree, and then one day it was just like she did it all, and that was a big victory. And once she had that, a lot of other stuff steamrolled, and she was able to deal with other things a lot quicker. Within another 6 or 8 months, she was remarkably better. And and I know I'm jumping around, but the first thing we did was we got her help, and then we realized that my wife and I needed help, so we started a parent group in Brooklyn. Parents, or Brooklyn and Manhattan, parents of kids with OCD, and that led us to meeting Kelly Anderson, who was a filmmaker. Her daughter had OCD, and eventually Kelly had always, even from like this day I met her, she was like, I'm a filmmaker. I know there's a film in this, but I just don't know what it is, because the filmmaker in me wants to show the whole process and the kids freaking, the grips of OCD and a kid just like being in their own head and the drama of it. But the parent in me knows that that's really not something the kid would want to see 5 years from now. So how do we do something positive or hopeful? And she had an idea a couple years later, and she approached me about making the film, and we created Unstuck. And that was for me and for us, and even Allie, my wife, was a way to give back to people that had helped us, show a resource, show a process to other people that we had gone through and that could work, and to give hope to people, because there's a lot of stuff you read, it's scary. Everything's in print form, these big giant books, and you just, like I said, you have to trust the process. But to create a video that allowed people to see the process or have kids explain the process, we just wanted to try to give hope and a way to, like kickstart the idea that you can get better. Not to sugarcoat the idea that it's easy or that it's instant or that it's not hard, but the idea that it's not just this negative thing, that there can be hope and help.
Yeah, and I think you do a good job, because the film is uplifting, and it's really hard to take OCD and make it uplifting. It's a hard topic to inspire other people. And there's such a lack of education. And I think not everybody is a researcher. Like I'm one of those people where I'm going to like read everything I possibly can when my kid has something. But most parents don't have the time and aren't going to get through those books necessarily. And even if you do, sometimes they're confusing, especially when you're talking about exposure response prevention.
Yeah.
That's kind of a bizarre concept. And so I think,
I would tell people to Google research to a point. I think there is a really easy way to get lost in a lot of the information, start going down roads like, well, if I, do some diet or try some essential oils or stuff, which are things that can help. But at the end of the day, they're, in my head, they're not going to cure. So there's like the books were a great resource for us. And there are some good ones that I think the therapists have made accessible to, they're not so clinical that you're like, oh my God, I feel like I need a PhD to understand this. And we've put a lot of those resources on our site, and there's books for kids, which are very helpful too. Even Vanessa, when, the initial thing that Vanessa would do with her sister, Charlotte, was like read these books, like Up and Down Worry Hill and Blink, Blink, Clop, just to get her an idea, like this is going through my head. So her sister would try to understand her. So the grandparents would try to understand. And, so I think it's like, I would say, like when I said research earlier, definitely do that. And then, you know, stop at a certain point or
Yeah,
get
that is
yourself
true.
into trust in the therapy. And then, I don't think it's a bad thing to try different diets or try different foods. But, yeah, I think that, it's the therapy that helps. Everything else is going to be, it might be a way to help cope or ease anxieties. But, it's the day to day. One of the best advice I think our therapist gave us early on was, because you're in the throes of everything. You're going, well, she's got after school, she's got this, she's got that, she's got homework. We have play dates. We don't want her life to stop. We don't want her to be stuck in the house. And our therapist was, you know, you know, gave us like a verbal, uh, just like um, verbal talking to. And it's just like, eat exposures are the most important thing you have to do every day. So we don't, she's like, it's more important than homework. It's more important than a play date. It's more important than soccer practice. It's more important than gymnastics. Like if you don't do that and you don't get her mental health better, nothing else is going to matter. So it was weird to have somebody else give us permission to say, all right, you didn't do your reading tonight. So what?
Yeah.
And to say it's okay if the grades don't keep up. And Vanessa has always been a good student, so we didn't have to deal with those struggles. She didn't really
Mhm.
struggle in school as much. There were some issues, but it was mostly in the home. Um, but to have somebody else give us permission to be like, okay, this is the thing you have to do at night. You come home at night and you take off your coat and you say, "How was your day, kids?" And then it's like, okay, Vanessa, here we go. We're gonna do your exposures
Yeah, which
every day.
is great. Because I think as an OCD therapist myself, I feel like that's sometimes the hard part too, is making parents, and this doesn't sound like it was part of your struggle, but getting them to see that exposure should take precedence over everything. That is the most important thing, because they're not going to be able to function at those after school activities, or they're not even going to be able to go to school if they don't get over the OCD and start doing the exposures.
Yeah, there were subtle things. We realized that everything was worse when Vanessa didn't get a good night's sleep.
Mm-hmm.
Or didn't wasn't as rested. Good night's sleep was hard too because OCD affected a lot of things at night. But if we didn't try to stick to more of try to get her at least 6 to 8 hours, or at least attempt to, it made things a little easier for her to fight. And um, telling her firsthand, this is what we're going to do. Like you don't have a choice in this, and that's a good thing I think about when you're a parent of a kid. The advantage you have is that like they listen to you, and you have to um, I mentioned it's harder with teenagers and adults, but it was, we every day we left 10 minutes early before school, and every day there was some trees she was afraid of. Every day we would walk in front of the trees. She knew that every day, and it was like, Vanessa, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about this. You will do something every day. And there were
So,
days when it took her 2 hours to get to school, but we did it.
how did you motivate her to do
Uh,
that?
there were a lot of small and big rewards. The reward system worked very well for her. We realized quickly that the negative stuff really didn't work as well. Punishing didn't make sense. Um, so some of the like small rewards, you would earn TV time, you earn time on an app, or big things like um, we were uh, she wanted to go see Katy Perry in concert. So I was like, okay, it was like 6 months away. So we said, all right, we're going to, if you show us that you do this, you don't have to succeed, but if you stick to it and you do it, then we will, we'll take you to the concert. And it wasn't like, she knew that she didn't have to be perfect. She knew she didn't have to overcome anything. We didn't want to set unreal expectations. It was more like, you have to commit to this. And if you show she commit to it, it's good. And then, so those reward systems generally had worked
Yeah.
throughout. And that was good. Little ones and big ones. And like, the example that I gave was an expensive one, but, we've done just like watch the TV show you want to watch. She had this trend where she liked these little squeezy dolls. She was like, okay, you show us 5 days that, you'll get a little squeezy doll that was $2. So
Yeah.
little things and big things work.
And I do think those motivators, those reinforcements are so important, because um, I rarely meet a kid that's going to really do exposures on their own. They need
Hmm.
that parental motivation. With my son, he's not going to do anything, and he's not going to eat anything without some sort of Robux. It's like, that's how we speak in my house is, do you want to do this exposure challenge? And then he's like, well, what is this worth? Is this a 99-cent Robux or, and I think a lot of times parents have I think some are uncomfortable with it because they're like, why do I have to bribe them to do something? And two, I think a lot of times parents don't provide that as much, they forget or they don't motivate their kids, and then the exposures aren't happening. And as a therapist, I know I only can do so much in the office. 90% of it,
absolutely,
99% is at home.
I mean, the therapist gives the parents and the kid the homework, and then it's up to you to check in and do it. You as the parent and the kid, we tried to be creative about things. It's a tremendous amount of trial and error. A lot of, 2 steps forward, 5 steps back. And once, to figure out what works, we created these, she had some clothes she wouldn't wear. So we had these games where we would throw them to each other across the house or across the room. It was like we'd throw a boot and then we'd do silly things like, okay, like put it over your head. And then I would do it and she would do it. And so you do some stupid things, you do things that maybe you're uncomfortable with. We would try to do little things that showed her, like, I hate mushrooms. I just don't like the taste of them. So it was like, okay, I'm going to do my exposure. I'm going to eat some mushrooms, like just things like that to show some solidarity, but also try to be a little creative about it. So she understood that, not to make a game out of it, but, have some fun. They are kids. They, so it's not total torture.
Yeah. And I do think if you make it fun, then kids are more likely to do it. And I think sometimes parents will look at exposures as like, I have to sit down and do this like homework. And I tell parents, we don't have to look at it that way. Like life is full of exposures. So when you see something that maybe you want to avoid, then you can make it fun. You can put toilet water in a water gun and shoot at people. Like I think if you think outside of the box and you do fun things, kids are more likely to do it as well. And I like that.
We had a recipe for vomit that we made. That was fun, and it stunk, but they had fun making it. So, little things.
Yeah, and I think with Throw Up, I mean, there are whole websites full of really creative ideas. Just last week, I had a girl in my office, and we were doing exposures for Throw Up, and I have this loop of someone throwing up. It's just an audio, and after a while, it started to sound like a beat. It's just like, and so we're dancing to it, and I think you can make things fun, and I think that kids will progress a little bit further. So I wonder what would be your best advice for parents who are just starting out with this struggle and just figuring things out?
Now, 4 years later than when we started, I think there's some good communities out there to join and get help with, and like on Facebook. There's a lot of closed Facebook groups where people will give you, you can pose your question and get some different responses. I definitely think you have to commit to reading some books about OCD.
What's your favorite book?
There was off the top of my head, I need to like look up the name of it. But I'm actually reading John Hirschfeld's book right now, like When Your Loved One Has OCD, and I think it's really fabulous because I had never really thought about. He brings up as like this is physical pain, it would hurt if you broke your arm. Well, imagine that kind of pain, but that's but it's going on in somebody's head about OCD, and so that helped me think about it differently. So I like that one. I wouldn't say that should be the first book somebody should read. I really liked, and forgive, I'm looking at like a resource page on the site right now. It was called When a Family Member, Talking Back to OCD. I really liked, and also Freeing Your Child from OCD.
Yeah, those are two of my favorites too.
And I think was it Freeing Your the one that is Talking Back to OCD was like written for kids and parents. So like kids, we did that as part of a free therapy program where we learned about that book and they both read it together. That was good. But Freeing Yourself from Obsessive Compulsive Disorder, that was really good because I think that lays out like how exposure therapy works. She gives examples of how different kids progress in different hierarchies and things like that, which is really, I don't know, gives you a grounding to jump
Yeah.
off of. I mean,
Yeah.
you have to be, the kids will become, just dovetailing back to the film about it, the kids will become OCD experts based on their therapy. And so you as a parent kind of have to do it in your own way, to understand, different things. The brain might work, to have the flexibility to understand how things work, that you can't accommodate, which is hard for parents not to do, that you have to learn how to read your kid in a new way, that you have to um, be a support. You can't fix them, but you can support them and cheerlead them and reward them, and also be the disciplinarian. I know I'm like going all over the place a little bit, but
Those are
another
good
great piece.
though. Those
But
are really
another,
important.
I think there's people give excuses. Parents give excuses when your kid is freaking out, right? Oh, good, this is OCD, so they're not going to get in trouble. Well, our therapist said, look, when your daughter's freaking out, that's not the time. And you could see the anxiety in her eyes. That's not the time to go, okay, you're punished. But if she does something that's against the rules, we would go back, and Vanessa would, let's say the next day or a couple hours later, she's calmed down. We say, okay, when you did this, you ran through the house and you slammed doors. We don't do that, so you're getting in trouble. So she understood that the behavior that was happening, she would get in trouble for.
Yeah.
So I know there are kids that, will throw things, and like we were hit sometimes, and I was like, we don't do that. You're going to get in trouble for it.
Yeah.
So
Those
that,
boundaries still need to be there.
yeah, it's not like right. The boundaries, they still do exist. Because you can't not still be a parent too, but there's so much learning, and it's hard. And I like, it's not like, next day everything's going to be easy. I mean, this is like we're still dealing with things 5 years in. So
Yeah.
the big difference now, I would say, with Vanessa and with our family is that when things pop up, we understand how to deal with them. We understand that Vanessa has this, like, there's the OCD side that's like, oh my God, this is really scary. At the same time, she's like, okay, I have to get over this. I get it. Whereas 4 years ago, it was like, no, I'm going to completely avoid. So she understands that she has to face those anxieties and deal with it. And
Yeah.
that's, to me, from what I learned in the book, that's what she had to learn. That's the point she had to get to. It was like, these things might keep popping up, whether it was 10 years down the road or a year down the road or something new. But as long as she learned the tools to, okay, I have to figure out how to fight this in a new way or different way, that was what was important.
Yeah. And I think you're bringing up some really good points, because one, I think that's a missing piece for a lot of kids is they don't learn, one, how OCD works at all. And they don't understand how they have to kind of live in a world where they are always fighting OCD, and that it's not our battle, it's really their battle. I mean, I spend so much time in therapy teaching kids what OCD is, and I want them to play what I call the OCD game in their head all the time. I'm having a fear right now. What am I going to do? What level am I going to do? Am I going to do the opposite? Am I going to delay it? Just getting them to have that habit. And I spend so much time trying to teach my child, like, to always look at the world through their OCD glasses. Because I think the other part that you brought up is, as parents, I think we get overzealous and we kind of take it on like we're failing if our children are not doing well.
Yeah.
And that's so hard to stomach. I mean, I have 3 anxious kids, so they all have 3 totally different issues. So it's exhausting, and it's my profession. So I feel like a failure on 2 levels, like mom failure, therapist failure. But then you have to take a step back and say, this is their battle. This is their journey. Like, I can't speed it up because I'm uncomfortable with it. And then you see them backslide, and you're like, oh my gosh, what's happening? We need to catch this really quickly. We don't want to go back to where we were, but you can't really control the pace.
No, and like I said, there's a lot of, and you just have to get to, there's a lot of like 2 steps forward, 3 steps back, 1 giant leap forward, and no steps back. You just have to, a lot of times, I think at the beginning, just prepare for things to get worse before they get better. There's dumb things we just fell into. At one point we realized that we can't, Vanessa has to have a victory no matter how small it is. So if she's like in the throes of her OCD, it's really in her brain, we can't get over it. Even just something just happened last week that we're dealing with. It's like she has to do something to fight. So even if it's like touching the thing for a second or saying the word just for a second, it's like it has to have some little victory. And we incorporated her into that was helpful for her, because we would say, okay, you can do this or this, but you have to do one of them. So you got to choose this, this, and this. And we'd give her a choice of 2 or 3 things. Like, you got to do one of them. And generally they would all be on the same level. It wasn't like, it was like, okay, I'm the contamination. You have to either kiss me or, wave to me from 3 miles away. It wasn't that. It was like they were all on the same level, but she could choose, which gave her the feeling of control. Because she's the one dealing with this. So she's got to figure out what she can do. And sometimes she would pick the easy, and sometimes she would pick the harder one. But it just, or the thing that we thought was harder. And that, giving her the help and the choice, seemed to really empower her more. And it became important to us that we have to show her that every day that OCD is a giant liar, and that's every day she can show that it's a victory. Even, as she'll get angry if I say this to her, but like sometimes I'll say, how many times has OCD told the truth? You were afraid of that milk, and you drank it, and what happened? You're fine. Did you die? Nope. Okay, so who won? We just try to constantly prove, and you hope that over time, you're seeding some thought in their brain to keep them their self-esteem up, their confidence up. They understand they can do it.
Yeah, and it's a big paper dragon, and so I think it's hard to try to teach kids. I always tell kids, they're like, they think they're on a cliff, but really if they go off the cliff, there actually is a little step right there. And so it's this really scary facade. And I also like the point that you made where you want to tell your kids they need to do stuff, like they have to lean into it and do exposures, but then giving them that control. Like yesterday I sat down with my son and I was like, every day we're going to do a challenge. We call them challenges, but I want you to tell me what food you're going to do each day. And so then he was developing, well, okay, this one is a 7 and this one's a 5. So I'll do that one. And then you want them to develop their own treatment or their own kind of ownership. Yeah. So I want to move into talking about Unstuck a little bit more. I think this is really helpful. I don't think there's anything else out there that is as helpful visually for kids. I bought it and I keep it in my practice. And whenever I'm about to start doing exposure therapy, I say, take this home, watch it, because otherwise parents and kids look at me like I'm crazy. When I talk about, we're going to, talk about toilet water, or we're going to sit here and watch vomit videos. They're kind of like, what is your problem? Like, parents think that I'm crazy. So having like this official documentary and saying, here, this is a little bit of what it is, gives it a lot of validity. And it also makes kids feel hopeful because it's all about kids talking. So can you talk a little bit about what's in the documentary?
Sure. The basic storyline, if you will, is we have 6 kids, all different types of OCD issues, from like just right and perfectionism, superstitious thoughts, contamination, scrupulosity. So they kind of describe in the beginning what their issues were and how it affected their family. There's a middle part of the film where we have 2 siblings talk about how it changed their family, how it affected their lives. And then kind of the back half of the film is all about what they learned about OCD, how exposure therapy works, how they made plans, some victories they had. Each one of them kind of talks about different ways they learned to fight it. All the kids in the film had different therapy, went different. Some were in like inpatient, some were in outpatient, some dealt with it in their own town. Some had to like move to other places to learn. So they have a lot of different experiences, but it gives from beginning to end a good outreach of like how OCD affected you, and then how it affects the family, and how you learn how the exposure and response prevention therapy can help and get you to have control of your issues. And I think what you said is probably the biggest thing. If kids don't get anything out of it, or parents don't get anything out of it other than I'm not alone and there are other kids with me, we've done our job. Because that was the hugest thing for our kids. Personally, Vanessa she would say to us, I'm not going to believe OCD is real until you show me another 9-year-old girl. And when she met somebody that was 9 or 10, we just got lucky, and the girl that had the appointment before us happened to have OCD. When that light clicked off, I think Vanessa realized, okay, my parents are not lying to me. My parents are actually maybe telling the truth. Maybe this thing, in the beginning, she kept saying OCD is not real. This is just me. You want to, why do you want to turn me into Fred? I want to be me, and this is me. So meeting somebody else and knowing that you're not alone, I think can be a huge motivator, make you feel not so lonely. And so if we can do that, there's a big win for us. And a lot of therapists have told us kind of what you said. It's like the first homework. You have your first intake session, and it's like, here's the DVD. Your homework is to go watch it.
Yeah,
and
that's really helpful.
Great.
And I think the biggest lie that OCD tells kids across the board is, you're crazy and nobody else thinks this way, and don't tell anybody because they're going to think you're crazy. And so the first thing is normalizing it and letting them know how common it is and that they're not alone. And the video is just a great visual for that, because I can sit there in my office and say, I just sit here all day and hear these stories. You're not alone. I can introduce you to a zillion other kids. They're kind of like, yeah, whatever. But then I'm like, here's this film. And that really brings it home because the kids are talking, which you can't replace that. There's just so much power in that.
Yeah, we were lucky. The things that we had to do, like behind the scenes, was just make sure that, the kids that we ended up speaking with could talk about their issues, that they were knowledgeable about OCD, because we realized early on that we never really wanted adults in the film.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you throw an adult or a parent or a doctor into there, suddenly it kind of undercuts what the kid says, and then it's like, oh, okay, here's the authority figure. But the kids are so smart and insightful that we realized that we didn't need even title cards to kind of explain the process. We have one in the beginning just to kick off the film, but initially we had, okay, there's going to be like title cards that will explain what the kids are going to talk about. But then we realized that we had enough footage where the kids explained it themselves. And there's just so much power. We presented at the OCD Action Conference in London last month. And it was interesting that so many adults would come up to us and say, God, if a kid can do this, why can't I?
Yeah.
And so you initially realize, well, the film has more power than just to parents and kids. It can talk to everybody, even people who don't have OCD. Maybe it's a great resource to say this is what it is, so they have a better understanding of it. So
yeah,
we're happy with the response it's got, and later this year we'll be able to give it to everybody. So it'll get more awareness, hopefully.
Yeah, it's gotten a lot of traction, which I think is great because it is such a helpful tool. So are parents not able to access it yet?
We have, there's two things. One, because we have a distribution deal, we aren't able to share it to people just yet. But the main reason is because the first release, year release of the film is your only chance to enter into film festivals. So if you have a film that everybody can access, the film kind of disqualifies you. So the first kind of year of the film was doing a lot of film festivals, which we're in the middle of now. We have a few we're about to announce next month, which are cool. And then, so hopefully by later this summer, we'll be finished with that, and we can just say, we'll probably have a streaming option that everybody can get, or anybody can buy DVDs. But one of the ways we were able to kind of get around that, we have a community screening option where if you create screenings or host a screening of at least 10 people, you can buy the film. We created a discount. So we were, aware that the market that we need to serve, we had to wait a little bit to serve. So we little ways to allow parents to get it that way. Really trying to do a lot behind the scenes to get therapists to understand it, to see it, go to conferences, email lists, send emails out to people, connect with people, just so they get an idea of this is an important resource. And like you have, get it, buy it for your practice, and then give it as homework. And
so therapists can buy it. So there's a professional license. You can buy it and then you can use it as a tool. Because I know a lot of therapists listen and watch kind of my work. And so they can access it and then use it kind of as part of their therapy.
Yes, therapists, professionals, administrators, schools, everybody can purchase the film through New Day Films. We have links on our website. So that is, that from day one, we could do that. It's
Yeah.
also available on a streaming service called Canopy, which most colleges have. So if you're an educator or administrator in a college, kids can stream it and watch it. You can use it as part of your curriculum, but it is available for any therapist to purchase at the moment. We've had, one of our, some of the big, treatment centers like Rogers and McLean, they bought it, and they came to us initially, even after our premiere at the OCD Foundation conference last year, and were like, we want this, how fast can we get it? So
That's cool.
that's good to see. Yeah, so they can embrace us. We just have to, it's really just parents and individuals that we have to wait a little bit longer. But yeah, any therapists out there, please go to our site, click the link. And
it's such a good tool. I'll leave links in the show notes for my podcast and on the YouTube. I'll put them down below. But I do feel like it's such a good thing to it's the first homework assignment. Take this.
Well, to that point, one thing we realized was that we created this like very short 5-part series called Extra Help, which is meant to kind of be an addition to, and for any therapist that buys it gets access to it, where it's like little short let's say 2 minutes or less videos where the kids talk about their first exposure, their first fear, things that are meant to hopefully help kids open up in therapy and understand, again, like, because they're not alone. These other kids can talk about it, I can talk about it too. So we created these like little 5 videos, which, can be an extra help. Watch it with the kid in therapy, or that anybody that buys a film can get, because to your point, we realized that people were using this as homework. So any ways we can help the therapy process or help kids open up, is going to benefit everybody.
So do they get the videos with that?
Basically, if you buy the film, we get record that you bought it, and then we email you the link and the password to this Extra Help series. There's one of them if you search like Unstuck Extra Help, one of them is available to watch as an example. And then we have 4 others. Yeah. So many people have, yeah, I know. As you were talking, I'm like, and I'm saying, and I'm like, I wonder if Natasha has this yet. Yeah.
I don't. I want that.
It's, and we have that, like, our New Day page has all that information on it, and quotes from different therapists and stuff. So we initially had this idea of like, if you bought the film, you could Skype with either us or one of the kids. But I think it was much easier to create these videos and use that as an option to say, hey, as an incentive to get the film.
And kids want videos. It's so funny because kids will go and watch my YouTube videos, and they'll listen to my YouTube videos more than they'll listen to me in my office, to the point where sometimes I'll plop a video in front of them of me, and I'll be like, here, watch this. This is going to explain what OCD is. And they'll watch it, and they'll be more intense watching my iPad than watching me in my video. And they'll be like, oh, it's just so much better when I see it on YouTube. I'm like, whatever works. So I think having those visuals, that's just how kids consume their information. And so they're going to watch
so much more now. The 4 years after we started, there's so much more now. Many people talking about it, many people doing their vlogs about it, many people just using social media, using hashtags about it. So there's a lot more that you can access. That's supportive tools, motivational tools. I think social media can easily be a negative. But if I've found the right places to look and found people and try to promote the people that are doing the things that need to be said. If more kids can find that, I'm actually, in some ways it's weird because I'm connecting with a lot of young people that are they are taking their voice and putting it to social media. And it's really cool to see, because that would have made a life a lot easier for us 4 years ago. Because I could have said, Vanessa, she's this little girl. She just recorded an Instagram story about her OCD. See, look, she's real.
Yeah, which is so neat. Getting more kids to do that is,
and it's happening. That's, I guess, the good thing. A lot of the kids, I don't know if you find the same thing, but a lot of kids that we meet at like the OCD Foundation conference, that let's say teenagers, they're all like, "Oh yeah, we're studying to be psychologists. We want to be therapists. We want to be OCD therapists." So I always say, hopefully, the next generation, another 10 or 15 years, that the statistics go down of like diagnosis. They say between 8 and 9 years, most people wait. Well, hopefully that'll go down, or hopefully there'll be a lot more treatment options, because we need that, which is I think still the biggest problem. People will say, well, I have a therapist in my area, but they don't do OCD, or have to drive an hour and a half, and the expense of it all. Those are things hopefully will change over time too, and adjust as more therapists start to deal with it, more awareness starts to become.
Yep. The more people
OCD.
talk about it, the more awareness, and then the more education will be out there. So definitely. Yeah. And thanks for doing your part, because I think you're a big part in that momentum.
Thank you. And we've connected on social media, I think, because we both have the same goals, and the program that you have is fantastic. And I use, whenever I find somebody who's like, I don't have therapists in my area, or they're not a good therapist, I generally will send them your link to say, like, well, here's something to work on. Here's a course. It's not going to replace the in-person therapist, but at least, it's a guide. It's that, and some of the books, it's really helpful for people to at least start.
Well, I appreciate
so
that.
I think you've provided some great resources, and the consistency is so important. So the fact that you send out an email every week, you produce a video every week or so, or write blogs, that consistency is helpful, because people need that, like, the reminder and the reassurance, and also this, like, the new tips and tricks that they can learn. And so it becomes a really good resource.
Well, thanks. Yeah, I don't feel like anyone should feel like they're alone. And there's a lot of free stuff out there that people can just access. So if they don't have an OCD therapist, there's some things that can fill in those holes and give people some hope and help. So,
oh yeah.
Well, cool talking to you.
Thank you.
Look forward to meeting you soon in person.
Yeah, you're going to be in DC?
I am. That is the plan, no matter what.
We'll definitely see you there. And thank you so much for having me on. If anybody's still watching our site, the film was called Unstuck, an OCD Kids Movie, and the website is ocdkidsmovie.com.
Perfect.
And we also have a Facebook page, the same thing. But I do run. I'm not sure when this is going up, but Sunday I have another Unstuck Kids Speak Out, where I go live with a kid who has OCD, and we talk about the issues. So we do that every week too. Yeah. And I've also found that, we couldn't cast everybody. We initially wanted to have like 10 or 15 kids, but you realize the more people you have in the film, the harder it is to get to know somebody. So a lot of the kids that we weren't able to cast in the film for various reasons, I'm going back to them saying, I want to talk to you now. Here's your chance to tell your story, or here's a chance to talk to other people. And a lot of parents and kids we're able to kind of like connect that way for an hour a month. So
that's
cool. A way to extend the message.
Yeah. So definitely check out your Facebook page so they can see the live stream of stuff like that.
Yeah.
All right. Take care.
Thank you so much, Natasha. Thanks everyone for watching.
All right. Thanks.
Bye.